This is the Unbounded Podcast, where we explore the front lines of technology, human rights, and freedom. I'm joined by Diverter, a privacy activist and champion of financial sovereignty. His journey into Bitcoin started back in 2016. As he dug into it, he quickly discovered its inherently political and subversive nature, and the power to challenge government control and give individuals true autonomy over their finances. Diverter's story is closely tied to Samourai Wallet, a project that was at the forefront of the Bitcoin privacy movement. This gives him a unique perspective on Bitcoin privacy. Samourai Wallet was more than just a wallet. It was a beacon of hope for those who believed in the true potential of Bitcoin to bring about financial sovereignty. In our conversation, we'll discuss the mindsets and the strategies needed to achieve financial sovereignty with Bitcoin and the personal costs of advocating for financial freedom and the risk of putting your life on the line for something that you believe in. We were already deep in conversation when we hit that record button. So let's jump in as Diverter shares his thoughts on the current state of Bitcoin and its potential as a tool for financial freedom.
Okay. So like I said, I kind of go back and forth a little bit on it. Bitcoin, as much as it exists as an actual tool for freedom and individual sovereignty, is probably in the most dangerous position it's been in, potentially in its entire lifetime, since the very beginning. And not so much in the same way as it was in the beginning. So in the beginning of this project, the danger was that it just wouldn't live. Like it wouldn't get enough legs to literally continue existing in the future. The government most likely had the power at that time to be able to just brute force shut this thing down because it was a small enough community, didn't have its legs under it yet. So it was a very dangerous time for Bitcoin in the beginning, just before the WikiLeaks stuff and all that, because is this thing going to actually live or not? Now it's a completely different sort of danger, and the danger is no longer, is this thing going to survive? Bitcoin is here to stay. Mm-hmm. However, the personal usage as a freedom tool, as a tool for individual sovereignty, that is not at all guaranteed. As a matter of fact, I would argue it's almost guaranteed that it will not be allowed to simply continue as in its current form. So in its current form, Bitcoin can still be used to subvert government power, to transact outside government surveillance and control, albeit much, much more difficult to do so right now with Samourai being on hiatus, but it can be done, and it can be done on the fringes of legality, right? So It's not fully outright illegal to self-custody your own Bitcoin yet, but I believe it will be. Now, whether that is a danger or not to Bitcoin itself, I think we may have reached a point where it actually isn't anymore. I think we may have reached a point in Bitcoin where it being outlawed to hold it in self-custody would not have the impact on it that it used to, because there are so many people involved in Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin, that have absolutely no interest in transacting in it. They have no interest in it being a tool for individual sovereignty outside of the quote-unquote inflation hedge. That's the only interest for a lot of people. And there's so many people holding it, so many Bitcoin in the wallets of people that think like that are they going to sell their Bitcoin because they hear that, it's illegal to self-custody now? No, they're not going to do that. So, what kind of impact would it have on Bitcoin itself as a network, as a protocol? We may be past that point. But as far as the real world impact, that is much more dangerous, because who's going to build the tools?
Right. That's a really good point. Who's going to build the tools?
Who's going to build the tools, And so, because what you would be doing now, what they have essentially already done, and I said this on Twitter a little while back, the government, especially in the United States, which is essentially the world government, because they'll come get you wherever you're at. But essentially what they've done is they've already drawn their line in the sand. Now, I'm hoping that maybe a new administration can kind of change this, but they've drawn that line in the sand, and they've said that essentially development on Bitcoin privacy tools going into the future will have to be done underground. They're driving it as far underground as they can. And that's evident when you look at the Samourai Wallet case and these guys that were following as clearly defined regulation as we have in the Bitcoin space for nearly a decade. I think the FinCEN guidance originally came out, I think it was 2013, and then they came out and reinforced it in 2019. So this was a decade, or maybe it's 2015 and 19. Either way, it was a decade or nearly a decade worth of regulation that FinCEN had put out that was about as clear as you get in the Bitcoin world, that said, if you don't take custody of coins, then you are not a money services business. And so therefore, you do not have to register as a money transmitter or money services business. And therefore, then you don't have to adhere to the AML KYC regulations because you are not a money services business. So custody was the red line. And that was very clearly and well understood for, like I said, a decade or more. And then suddenly, a random April day in 2024, they just decided to completely overstep a decade plus worth of guidance and arrest these guys who were very clearly operating their service within the rules of those regulations. So,
Right.
If you can't follow the regulation that they put out that says if you don't take custody, you're not a money services business. So you don't take custody and now you get arrested for conspiracy to operate an unlicensed money services business. What are they telling you? They're telling you that it doesn't make any sense to try to follow the rules, as my favorite villain of all time in movies says, in No Country for Old Men, he says, if following the rule got you to this point, then of what use was the rule?
Yeah. No, for sure. I want to just take a step back. You clearly dedicated a significant part of your life, right, to the Bitcoin privacy movement. What drives you to be a part of this fight? Obviously, you have your own personal reasons. Is there a bigger kind of reason here?
My origin story, for lack of a better term, helped me be more clear with people about the ramifications of this and what is going to happen. And that is exactly what has happened when shit starts hitting the fan is, all these, not all of them, but the vast majority of these people online, what I'd like to call the quote unquote come and take it people, the people that are post on Twitter and talk about, oh yeah, come and take it. I lost all my Bitcoin in a boating accident, et cetera, et cetera. You are going to fold when they come for you. That's a fact. You're going to fold.
Absolutely. Let's say that one more time. When they come for you, you are going to fold.
That's a fact, right? Like a lawn chair. So, and that's the vast majority of people. Now, there are those few that won't, right? And those few that won't become the examples for everyone else that does. That's how that works. And so we see that right now with Samourai Wallet. They are becoming the examples for everyone else to go ahead and fold. We already saw the week they were arrested, multiple companies shut down immediately. Lightning companies that there hadn't even been an announcement about Lightning, but they saw the writing on the wall. They immediately shut their companies down. They stopped serving U.S. customers in an effort to try to avoid this. Like, that is how they operate. The government is a one-trick pony. This is how they do things. Yeah, so it helped definitely shape my view of things going forward and trying to explain to people the gravity of these things, of working on these things, of being involved in these things is very real. And, especially when you have a wife and kids, or husband and kids, whatever, you have a family that you're trying to support. You're just some person living life. Whenever they come and put that weight on you, you have no idea what it feels like to have the weight of the government pressing down on you. And so to think that you will look at your family and your children and make the decision to stand strong and say, oh, no, I don't have that Bitcoin. I don't, whenever you went on a KYC exchange, you went on Cash App and bought your Bitcoin in a DCA every day, right? Just like people on Twitter were telling you to. Just set a DCA, bro, and then you'll have it. And now they've outlawed Bitcoin self-custody. And it's a simple email to Cash App saying, hey, give us your KYC records of all these people. And then it's a simple email out to you saying, hey, we see you bought X amount of Bitcoin on XXXXX date. Where is it? And that you're going to just say, oh, I lost it in a boating accident, bro. And as you're sitting here looking at your family, give me a break, right? Get real. So that's what I have spent so many years trying to impress upon people, like, get real with yourself. Be real with yourself about it. The only way that you are in reality going to stand up against them is if you are at least very confident that your ownership of Bitcoin is not easily accessible with a simple email to a single centralized company. Like, at the very least, you have to not be on their list in order to feel like you have some sort of ability to stand up to them.
And you never know. Was there a particular moment when you just said, I got to get involved in this Bitcoin privacy, fight? Right. Like, I mean, I consider you to be pretty hardcore, a hardcore activist. You really believe in this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So what made you step into this fight knowing, and I think you've even tweeted about this and talked about it, knowing that what happened to Samourai was probably inevitable at some point, somewhere, somehow?
Yeah. My origin into everything was a very lonely journey, I would say. So when I got into Bitcoin, all I was trying to do was preserve some purchasing power. That's all I was trying. I was trying to beat inflation. So I had correctly identified, without being into like Austrian economics or Bitcoin or gold or hard money or anything like that. I was looking at my checks and like they're not buying the things that they were buying. And I feel like I'm going backwards and I've got to try to figure out how to beat this thing. So I started,
That's not normal, Diverter.
Right. So I started.
Not back in 16, 17?
Yeah, to 16. Yeah, this is 2016. And so, I got into stocks in the stock market, and I'm sort of looking at, trading. And this is when Robinhood was first coming out, and now trading was more accessible to people. And so I start looking into things and looking at charts and analyzing, doing technical analysis and all this stuff. So I got into that stuff, and I, got kind of a little bit of a following on people that like to see and hear the things that I was talking about. I had a guy ask me one time, "Hey, have you ever looked at Bitcoin, at the Bitcoin chart?" And I was like, no, never have, nothing about it. Pulled it up, and then I was like, whoa, this is getting ready to explode, like right now. Just looking at the chart, it was like it was ready. This was something that was getting ready to take off. But again, I'm still looking at it as a stock. I don't know what it is at all. I'm thinking it's just like a stock, some sort of new tech stock. I don't know. But it looked like it was getting ready to go up in value, so I bought some of it.
I mean, it looked like a trade to you is what it sounds
like. Yeah, it looks like a trade. Yeah. And so I bought some of it. It went up. It went up like 20%, which, in the stock market that's a good trade. So I took my 20% profit, happy as a clam that I took my 20% profit. And then I watched it run all the way up to about $20,000. And when that happened, it kind of stopped me. And I realized there's something here that I do not understand. I don't know what this is, but stocks don't act like that. I have no idea what is going on with this thing, but now I'm interested. And so I just began kind of looking into Bitcoin. And I didn't go the route of podcasts or YouTube, which there weren't nearly as many podcasts back then.
2017, there was a handful.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just scattered information at that time.
Exactly. So I just kind of start looking into things a little bit and reading online, and then it just kind of sucked me in. The vortex kind of sucked me in. I started learning all these things that I had no idea about. And once you start learning about this stuff and you start realizing how badly you're being screwed by the current monetary system, at least to me, it was overwhelming. I know several people have told these stories, but I am one of them, where it essentially overtook my life for about a week. I was forgetting to eat, not sleeping, not doing my work. I was completely just enamored by this thing. Couldn't take my eyes off of it.
That is a common experience, and from a psychological perspective, it is pretty profound. I mean, I've been in and out of the tech industry, and there's not another technology over that 20 years that has captivated people in that way I know of. Like,
that's not surprising.
Yeah, the masses. I mean, maybe AI is doing that now because it's an inflection point, but people, there's something profound about that, and it's real. So I never really studied economics and money and the properties of money.
No, not at all.
And I never even really got into technology all that much, although I was in the technology industry.
Same. I was not involved in any of this stuff. I was a jock growing up. I didn't care anything about computers or the internet, it was the furthest removed from my mind as it could be.
Totally.
But this thing just kind of took me over. And so the more I start reading about it and learning about it, very, very quickly to me, it became extremely apparent that this thing was inherently subversive. This is not a mainstream asset. It was very, very clear to me that the ideas behind Bitcoin, the design of Bitcoin, the things that you can do with Bitcoin are inherently subversive and inherently political. I know people try to say Bitcoin's not political all the time, but I think that's completely backwards. I think Bitcoin is inherently political. Yeah, it's foundation. That was very clear to me very, very early. So I consider myself somewhat lucky in that aspect that I didn't just stop with the, cool, I can make a lot of money, that I actually started trying to understand why this thing is worth so much money. Why are people so invested in it? That's what kind of led me to it. So when I started seeing the trail that this was leading me down, that this is a subversive asset, that certainly the government can't just allow this thing to grow into the potential of what it could be.
Just to stop real quick. So you mentioned subversive. I think that's that can be pretty charged, and people who don't understand where we're coming from would think that that's like kind of a negative thing to say, but it seems like this idea of subversive characteristics, the design, the ideas of Bitcoin is what really, really hooked you into.
Yeah, certainly. It's subversive in the aspect that it, by its very design, it is designed to allow individuals to have full power and autonomy over their finances. And nothing else offers that outside of, maybe you could argue, gold, years ago. But in a digital world that is just becoming more and more digitized by the day, there is no way to be fully autonomous and have full control over your own personal finances without Uncle Sam's helping hand. It just doesn't exist. So everything that you do, whether you realize it or not, but everything that you do is routed through the government and therefore approved by the government. And so anything that is not approved by the government, so any sort of anti-government thought, or even some things that are not, you wouldn't think would be anti-government, just like, gun ownership. You would think in the United States, if anywhere, that being pro-gun ownership and pro-guns, like this would be the place to be for that. But that's not actually true when you start looking at the companies that are running the financial system in the United States. They tend to be very anti-gun companies, like credit card companies, things of that nature that won't process, gun transactions. That to me is what Bitcoin is. It's radical personal responsibility for those who choose to undertake it. And again, that's why I've often said that Bitcoin is for anyone. It's not for everyone. That's a very big distinction. Bitcoin is for anyone that wants to use it, can use it. But it is not, and in my opinion, in its designed form, will not ever be for everyone to use. Mass adoption is just a pipe dream. Anything that would be, quote unquote, mass adopted would be so different from the thing that we know as Bitcoin in order to make it work for the masses that it would lose all its bite. So the thing that gives Bitcoin its bite is the personal ownership. The fact that you can fully own this thing. And, like your house, if you buy a house, even after you pay it off, there are taxes that if you don't pay, they will come and take your house. So do you really own that house? The money that's in your bank account, can you go withdraw all of it out on a Saturday night if you feel like just withdrawing all your money, putting it under your mattress? No. Can't do that. So do you really own this thing, or do you just have a lease on it? Is it something that they've got the first lien on all your stuff?
Without question.
Yeah.
It's just so obvious to people.
Sure.
And I think that is one of the great things about just Bitcoin in general. I can be very critical of the Bitcoin community these days, but I think on the positive side over the last 4 or 5 years, especially, is there's no question that the Bitcoin community has educated not only itself about a lot of these ideas, but also the general public, I think, to a large extent, I think.
Certainly. Yeah. Now, whether or not it's something that appeals to them is different, because it doesn't appeal to everybody. I would actually argue it doesn't appeal to most people. Most people want a bank. Most people want somebody that is going to take care of their money for them. right? If somebody steals their money off their card, the bank will get it back for them. They want a customer service rep that they can call. Like, most people don't want the radical personal responsibility that comes with full self-custodial Bitcoin ownership. So
Sure.
That's fine. But I did, right? I did. That did appeal to me. It appealed very much to me. But
So absolutely. And you speak so eloquently about this. And I just recommend anybody who is listening to this podcast to check out your many, many podcast interviews that are out there. You speak very eloquently and passionately about these things. I love it, man. I love it. I'm just glad that you're still around and you haven't disappeared on us. But take us from the subversive. So this idea clearly just captivated you. I don't think it's happening in a vacuum. I think this is very much happening from if you buy into the fourth turning thesis that our society is going through massive changes right now. Institutions are collapsing, a crisis of credibility.
Sure.
So that totally makes sense because, and you saw it sooner than most people. And I think more and more people every day are kind of understanding what's at stake. And then you're like, okay, given this context, look at this technology, look at what it can do. This is pretty radical. It can really, unlock some possibilities, or opportunities that just weren't even available not that long ago.
For sure.
So how did you go from being completely activated in that way to actually contributing? Connect those two dots.
Funnily enough, the first Bitcoin wallet that I ever downloaded was Samourai Wallet. All right, that was the first Bitcoin wallet that I ever downloaded, and I did that.
I heard you talk about that.
Yeah, just because of the logo. I thought the logo was cool.
Funny,
right?
Never underestimate the power of a logo.
I'm telling you,
that is a perfect example.
I'm telling you. That was the first wallet I downloaded because I searched Bitcoin wallet on the Play Store and I just scrolled.
This is subversive.
I said, this looked cool, man. It's just a cool looking. I had no idea what the wallet was, what I had in my hands. I had no idea. So I ended up going backwards from there. I went back to like blockchain.com wallet and Mycelium. I went backward and then came full circle back to Samourai. But I came full circle back to Samourai after running into Samourai on Twitter. So it was just random enough. Like, I really did like the wallet, but I had no concept of what it was actually doing. And so I was just a random comment on Twitter one day, and I said to somebody, the wallets that I would tell people to use are Mycelium and Samourai Wallet. And again, forgive me for the Mycelium recommendation, but this was early, right? So I tagged, you can tag these accounts in the comment, and I tagged Mycelium and Samourai Wallet. And Samourai Wallet actually answered the comment and said, thank you for your support. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Let me follow them. I didn't even realize, like, I'm brand new to Twitter. Like, I'm just figuring everything out. So I'm like, oh, cool. I'll just follow Samourai. And then that following Samourai on Twitter is a journey in itself. So if you start scrolling back through Samourai Wallet Twitter history, it's like,
oh, it's fantastic.
Oh my God. It's just a treasure trove.
It's a total treasure trove. And you realize, this is what comes to mind when I look at that. You say, these guys were the real deal.
Yes.
These guys had it right. These guys are cool. They actually stand for something. They're principled. And they build like just the best products as far as Bitcoin privacy.
Well, that was the thing that kind of got me, is that, as you mentioned earlier, this sort of visceral response to this stuff. And it makes you really feel something. And so I went from feeling like I was completely alone and isolated and potentially going crazy to surrounded by a group of people that not only saw things the same way I saw them, but had so much more knowledge and information and different points of view. And not everybody agrees with each other, and that's fine. And we fight and we argue, and, like, everybody has taken to calling, just these big red lines. Red lines are a very, very important aspect and part of, like, the Samourai Wallet community. And so, you draw your own personal red lines, and these are the things that you absolutely will not cross, no matter what.
And defend. I mean, I think that's what the Samourai ecosystem syndicate is, I think, some of the most intellectually honest in the Bitcoin community. There's a lot of different tribes in Bitcoin world, but people who are very passionate about this stuff and very authentic, I find. That's the thing about this community, is the Samourai syndicate can spot inauthenticity a mile away. And that's why, when I started this podcast, very much I'm wanting to contribute to this community just because it very much aligns with my values. Yeah.
Well, that was the thing, is that's what kind of got me. I started noticing that, well, first of all, these were just like people like myself, and everybody, it seemed like, was contributing something. And that was very uplifting to me to see that I, being as non-technical as I am, not knowing how to code anything, I can't contribute to the code. I can't, even at that point especially, I couldn't read or audit any sort of code. I couldn't tell you what any code was doing. I didn't know anything about anything, but I still felt like I can contribute something because I felt like there are more people like me out there than there are people that understood this stuff. So if I can somehow find a way to be somewhat of a translator between these two worlds and find a way to allow people to understand what this stuff is doing, why you should care about it, and then finally how to actually take action and do it. If I can start putting some of that stuff out and getting that into people, that's a real contribution. Like, I'm actually contributing to this thing instead of just, taking. I didn't want to just be a taker. I didn't want to just take all the knowledge and take all this wealth of information, all these things in my life. I'm changing aspects of my life to the positive, and I'm just taking. And I wanted to be able to give something back. That was the big part of me, is that I wanted, because it's one thing to, theorize and have all these discussions, which is really cool. Like, you can learn a lot about yourself, about the world, just by having discussions around these topics. But at the end of the discussion, like, now what are you going to do? Are you actually going to do anything about it, or are you just going to, log off the computer and go catch the game? And so I wanted to find a way to talk to the people that maybe wanted to do something, but were scared to try to do it because they don't know what the hell they're doing. Because that's where I was at for so long. So that's what I just started doing, was I'll just maybe write a guide. I think I first started just literally doing like a weekly Twitter recap, if my memory serves. This is a long time ago, but my memory serves. I
started simple.
Yeah, I was doing like a weekly Twitter recap of what Samourai Wallet was talking about on Twitter, and I would post that in the Telegram, and they would pin that little PDF file or whatever in the Telegram and let everybody read it and kind of catch up, and people liked it. And so I was like, oh, cool, that's that's awesome. I was embraced. I wasn't, they didn't make fun of me. They didn't do any of that. They saw that I wanted to contribute, and so they helped me. And that just really just spurred me on. So now I was like, oh, cool. So now what can I talk about? So everything just opened up from there and led to me writing, my mining guide, because when I started telling them, like I said, I started mining and all this stuff without even having a conversation on Twitter, without even really having a conversation on Reddit. Here I was, just this lone maniac, just with a miner running in his house at a time when very few people were actually doing that.
Before AI could help you out. Right?
Yeah. And like, very few people were actually doing this. And so Zelko, was adamant that he wanted to know more about how he could do it, and he kept on pestering me until I finally was like, fine, I'll write a little simple guide. And I sat down with the intention of writing like literally 2 or 3 paragraphs about physically, legitimately, how do you set up a mining thing in your home? But then when I started writing, I was like, well, like, why would you even do that though? Like, everybody's going to tell them not to. If they ask anybody else, they're going to tell them not to. So I got to at least talk about why you would do it. And then the more I started touching on a topic, I was like, well, if I got to talk about that, then I got to talk about this other thing. Next thing you know, it's like a 5-page, damn near manifesto on home mining and, why you should be doing it and then how you can do it.
And it had a massive ripple effect. So that's a powerful story. I didn't quite realize that it was that mining guide that you did that really, that's a whole nother kind of podcast in and of itself.
Yeah, but not to get off on another tangent, but that was very cool to see, a spoiler alert, like, I feel like I was vindicated, like I was right.
And then you were hooked, and then you were totally off the races, right? Like, that's one hell of a journey and totally makes sense. And I think in that process, you kind of learned what some of your talents are, I think, along the way. I'm not sure maybe you appreciate it a little bit more now, but, there's a saying that your community will tell you what you're good at if you're paying attention. I really believe that. It's very, very true. And I think that's what happened with you. You really can just articulate these things for the average person who's not technical to understand without like dumbing it down.
Right. Right.
But let me ask you this. So as you look back over the journey, was there a moment that you realized that becoming associated with Samurai community, the Bitcoin privacy, all of that, that would actually make you a target, of government overreach? Or was there a moment that you realized you're like, oh shit, like maybe I'm on the chopping block here?
Yeah, so I think I always kind of knew that, and it was the reason that I approached some of the things in the way that I did. I've never been fully anonymous by any means, and I'm well aware that, especially by going to conferences and being in person, I've been at conferences where I know for a fact the feds were outside taking pictures of license plates of all the cars in the parking lot. Like that's a real thing that happened, that conference organizers were shown pictures by the feds that only someone at the conference could have given them. So like these things are very real. Like this is not, a lot of people like to use this term LARPing, like you're just live action role playing. It's not real. You just want to pretend that you're on some list or something. No, you're probably on the list. Like that's a fact. But there's some things that once you open the door and you make the decision to take the first step through it, there is no going back through that door. And so, if you're going to get wet, you might as well go swimming, is the way I've always kind of looked at it. And
that's pretty profound, really. And I think that's a massive decision.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, because so, for example, I'm going to be interviewing a human rights activist from Burma, and he's in exile now, and he's got a really powerful story about how he used Bitcoin to help him, make it to the United States. It's a very heroic and just amazing story about, when the military took over, and so long story short, they came after him. He decided to speak up, and But there is that moment where you're kind of looking into the abyss, right? And you're like, this is for real. The consequences are potentially real, not potentially, very real.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's still kind of theoretical at the same time, right? And
100%. Right. Like, even when you're telling yourself like these are the things that could happen, there's a big part of your mind that's like, yeah, but I mean it's not really going to happen. Like it's good to be prepared and to do all these things, but like they're not. Who am I? They're not really going to actually come after us or anything. That's what your brain is kind of telling you. Even as you're telling yourself, no, this is very real, you're still, yeah, but not really.
There was an activist that I was listening to that was talking about, he's like, look, man, you can say what you say and that's fine. But when the boot of the state comes knocking on your door and they take you away, you are going to have many dark night of the soul nights.
Oh,
right?
dude. Yes.
It's terrifying, and I don't think people really appreciate that.
No, 100%. And I want to be kind of very clear on the way I've always viewed like myself and my participation in these things. I am as much a nobody as you can ever possibly be. So when I spoke at several conferences, and they always ask me for, my title, like what are you going to put down under your name whenever, like the camera pans to you and you're talking, like it says, Diverter, and then it says, whatever you are, what you're the CEO of a company, or, what is your tag? And I always would just give them, I'm just some dude that likes Bitcoin. That's my tag, like, because that's all I'm just some guy that like Bitcoin.
Right. No big deal, man. No big deal. Nothing to hide.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's all I am. I'm just
open.
some guy.
Just some guy.
So I'm not, like, I've never considered myself an activist. People like the guy that you were just talking about, that's an activist. Somebody that has, had to flee a country and spoken up against their government. Somebody that has founded a company that allowed other people to speak up against their government. I look at people like Snowden and Assange, and now I put, you put the founders of Samourai Wallet in that same category of people that founded these companies or did these things that allowed so many other people to be involved. I never for a million years have ever put myself anywhere near that category, because I'm just not me. Now, the fact that I don't put myself in any sort of category like that has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on what category the government puts me in.
Right.
So you should be be very clear about that with yourself and with everyone else. Just because you think you're a nobody not doing anything does not mean they do. And so, you know, that's why I've been very outspoken and very clear with people that they need to be realistic with themselves whenever you take this path, when you open this door. If you have, you know, a family and you've got young kids at home and you're buying a house and you're working and you're trying to do it, like, be very realistic with yourself about what you're willing to lose. And
this
what
is
you're willing to put on.
so critical. So critical.
Yeah.
Is you have to get clear on that as much as humanly possible. Because nothing is going to prepare you for a boot at the door pre-dawn raid, right?
No, 100%.
Nothing's going to prepare you for that. But you have to at least do a thought experiment on it, right?
Yeah.
And kind of think it through and be like, are you willing to shed blood for this? And how much are you willing to go in on this? You know,
Sure.
I was just going through Samurai's, you know, Twitter feed, right? And they talk about that just a few years ago. It's like, you got to shed blood for Bitcoin privacy.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, nobody's going to give it to you, right? The powers that be, it's not, you know, the revolution is not a dinner party, right? Or whatever metaphor you want to say, they're not going to give it to you. Right. That's clear. And, you know, I always say there's no big tech company that's going to do their own version of Whirlpool and throw that out for the goodness of the world. Right. Like, that's just never going to happen. It's going to be underground.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, you know, unleashed to the world, right?
It was crazy that Proton Mail, I don't know if you saw this, but Proton Mail was about to release Whirlpool in their wallet. Did you see this?
I kind of saw that, and I'm just very skeptical.
Well, I mean, they're not now, but like before Samurai was arrested, like they unbeknownst to, I think, anybody, I don't even think Samourai Wallet knew that Whirlpool had been working on integrating, that the Proton Mail had been working on integrating Whirlpool into the wallet that they were just about to release. So like, and that's a key aspect of this whole thing, I think, is Samourai Wallet were right on the cusp of releasing these things and being so ubiquitous and released to people that normally may have not ever been exposed to it, that this was almost the moment, like it was almost there. And I think that had a big impact. I think that had a big impact on their actions.
Sure. Yeah, massive. And, you know, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole right now, but I do think what I tell people, you know, a lot of people in this space, and I love just about everybody in this space, but are very skeptical, let's just say, of government, politicians, government institutions, and rightfully so, right? It's kind of cypherpunk. They don't want to be a part of it. It's like, fuck that. Nobody, you know, don't ever put your trusts and, you know, and trust your future to some of these people, which I totally get. However, I tell people we need time, you know, hopefully with this new administration, call off the dogs, right? Yep. Drop the charges and build, right? And build. And because it does seem, you know, I feel like I'm a newbie in this world. And I think it's kind of difficult for people that have just come on. Like, you know, I went down the rabbit hole to hardcore about 6 months before they got arrested. Right. So it's like, I got my, Ronin Dojo node, and, I'm got the wallet, I got my graphene, I'm doing all the right things, right? Spending all my free time. And then just the rug completely got pulled. And it seems like that we were very, very close to getting there. Right. So we're all trying to kind of figure out where we are. But
that's kind of, again, a big part of, I think, the point is most people are not willing to make the sacrifice that government is very clearly telling you you're going to have to be willing to make in order to step into the arena to build the tools that need to be built. And government is very aware of that. And that's like this, again, they're a one-trick pony. This is why they do the things the way that they do them, is by going after the biggest and the baddest. This is a long-standing cliche, that you want to get your respect. What do? You go up to the biggest, baddest, meanest guy in the room and you punch him right in the mouth, right? Because it's not about what you did to that guy. It's what everybody else saw. Everybody else just saw you punch the biggest, baddest dude right in the mouth. So that's essentially what they've done here is they came for the head of the snake. They came for the head. And what they're betting on is that this was not a hydra. They're betting that this was a one-headed snake. They're betting that this will have a chilling effect enough that it will allow them to continue to develop their tools on the surveillance side and allow them to get back ahead of us. The sovereignty tools aspect, we're always a little bit ahead of where the government is. Like, this is how darknet markets have existed for years and years. Like, we're always a little bit ahead. And that's the whole point, is you got to keep moving. You got to stay agile. You got to stay ahead. So,
that's so interesting. Yeah, that's so interesting you say that, because it definitely, that's what the whole point was, right? That's what it seems like to me. And I'm not an expert on these things, but in terms of like choke point, 2.0 or any of these massive, and I think it's just criminal what they have done. If there's any consolation whatsoever with Samourai and what happened with those, is they were not alone. It was an industry-wide, clearly societal thing.
Yes.
In many, many ways, it was like Bitcoin became like this right-wing kind of nutty technology that was like tagged as, toxic masculinity or whatever, right?
Yep.
And it was caught up in this very nasty culture war at the same time. But there were a lot of people in the crypto world, which we did not understand, that were also getting frog marched out of their house in front of their children at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of people that have made these huge sacrifices in order to move Bitcoin forward. Ross Ulbricht was just recently released from prison after having, a double life plus 40 years sentence and get pardoned. So his use of Bitcoin on the Silk Road darknet market was pivotal in really proving out Bitcoin's technology. And so it was a big step forward. It really moved Bitcoin forward. Now, a lot of people maybe feel like that was the wrong kind of like attention for Bitcoin or whatever, but it was really a proving ground, just like Wikipedia, when they came for Assange. These are proving grounds to show that Bitcoin can actually do the thing that it's theorized to be able to do.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that. But yeah, it was actually, obviously, to people who have studied this, it was earth-shattering in many ways. If you're the powers that be, the governments around the world, it's like, okay, just put the nature of the marketplace that Ross had created. It was the business model. Right? I mean, it's like, oh, okay, this is actually a parallel kind of self-sustaining, self-contained, for lack of a better word, economy.
Right.
Here, digital economy, and it doesn't take like a lot of imagination to be able to extrapolate that out and blow that out of what those possibilities could be.
Yeah.
Who do you think has made the biggest sacrifices for Bitcoin privacy?
I would just think that it is these people that have felt the weight of the government press on them in unprecedented ways. So like Ross Ulbricht, and the funny thing is these are not people that are actually coding on Bitcoin. They're not developing Bitcoin privacy tools necessarily, but their use of Bitcoin technology furthered the growth of Bitcoin and the adoption and the proving out of the technology. And, for that, they were targeted. You look at, Julian Assange, I would consider has made big steps for Bitcoin privacy, even though, he didn't do anything for Bitcoin privacy tools, anything like that. But, he used Bitcoin to kind of keep WikiLeaks alive when they began getting cut off by banks and financial processing. So that kind of proved out that Bitcoin can be this parallel sort of economy. Then you've got Ross Ulbricht used Bitcoin on Silk Road market. And so now this is when we start getting more into the Bitcoin privacy aspect in particular, because again, it's been proven now Bitcoin can work to allow a marketplace or an economy to run parallel to the normal financial economy. And so when you start doing things like darknet markets or even donating to WikiLeaks, this starts to shine a light on the fact that Bitcoin is not an anonymous currency as it was originally marketed, in the early days. A lot of people got hurt by that original marketing, that this is an anonymous digital currency that nobody knows where you're sending it to or who you are.
To this day.
Yeah.
But I understand the point that you're trying to make.
Yeah. Certainly, yeah. So, so now but for those kind of in the know and involved in Bitcoin, it really does highlight that, oh, wait, we have to build some sort of privacy protections into this protocol, or on top of this protocol, in order to protect people, because the promise of Bitcoin is with individual freedom and liberty and putting the power back in the hands of an individual citizen. But if they're scared to use the Bitcoin because they're not confident that they can do it in a private manner, then they have to always fear the retribution of the government coming back after they've tracked their Bitcoin transactions from 2011. If that's the case, then that has a chilling effect on activists, on everyone worldwide. And so it starts really like lighting a fire under Bitcoin privacy. So without even writing the first piece of code, without even throwing any sort of idea about Bitcoin privacy out there, just by using it in these marketplaces and for receiving donations, it's highlighted the fact that there is a problem with Bitcoin privacy. So they made huge sacrifices. Samourai Wallet obviously have made an enormous sacrifice. And it's funny that, again, they tried to do this thing the right way, quote unquote. So they made conscious decisions not to develop this thing completely underground and to treat themselves like criminals, because we're following the law, right? There's always this point where you can follow the law, but you can go right up to the edge. Right. And this is how
that's all Silicon Valley. I mean, when you think of like Uber in the early days, man, I mean,
exactly.
they would go into New York City, they would go into San Francisco. It was totally illegal at the time.
100%.
Illegal. And they had their lawyers and and it's like they had this whole thing game plan battled out, and they're like, hey, we're going for $1 billion markets here.
Yes.
But we don't give a fuck.
Right.
We're lawyered up. But I think what I tell people, but see, these people are the quote unquote elites, the ones that have started these companies, the investors, the VCs, and the people that they hire. They are the establishment. Mm-hmm. And that's what's different with an open source project is you have no protection. You have no VC behind you a lot of times. I'm sure there's exceptions that's going to go out and kind of help and defend you, right?
Well, the problem with privacy is it's always going to be a niche part of anything that it's built into. So a privacy tool, in order for it to be like used by the masses, for lack of a better term, it has to be built somewhere in the background. It has to be something like HTTPS, where there's some sort of encryption that just becomes a part of internet traffic. Like,
right,
it can't be, if it's an extra app that you have to download on your phone that you download specifically to gain some sort of privacy, it will always be niche. And so with Bitcoin,
and the problem that we have is it's the capitalist business model today, especially with AI. It's surveillance capitalism, right?
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, you look at Silicon Valley. It is surveillance tech, right? And it's not trying to be doom and gloom. It's just a reality.
Yeah,
they want to measure everything. I mean, your blood pressure, your glucose, every metric humanly freaking possible.
Yeah. Wherever your eyes look on the screen, how long you stop scrolling for, all that stuff. So that's where the money's always going to be at, not in the opposite end of that. And the argument against privacy tools is always such an easy, simple argument to make to most people. Yeah. Because anybody that's involved in any sort of privacy, anything in their life, I guarantee you, if they've ever talked to anyone else about it, I promise you've at least, probably from every person, but at least from every third person you've heard, well, I mean, I'm not doing anything wrong anyway, so like, I don't have anything to hide. That's such a fundamental mindset of people these days. And our data being harvested and taken has just become so normalized that trying to say, well, wait, I don't want to hand over all that data. You are looked at as the outsider. Well, why not? What do you have to hide? That's such an easy argument to make to people.
It is. I think my theory is it's just going to probably take another decade or two. But let me ask you this. So they paid a heavy price, but do you think these sacrifices are necessary? I personally do not see any way around it. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I think that's 100% true. And furthermore, the Samourai Wallet guys knew this. And so, I spoke at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville. And I was on a panel with Kano Alchemist and with Zach Shapiro, who's one of the lawyers that's helping out. One of the things that I talked about during that speech was just how I'm somewhat torn on this, and still to this day I find myself kind of torn on this, because the one part of me is absolutely just horrified that my friends are going through this, and then there's another large part of me that is super grateful that my friends are the ones that are going through this, because it was going to have to happen. This fight has to happen. And so I'm glad, a big part of me is glad that these are the guys we've got fighting on our side, because they're not going to fold. They know that this was coming. They understood this was a risk, to keep from going into it too much, but just believe me when I tell you, they fully understood that this was a very, very real potential. Now, I don't think we believed that it was going to happen this fast. I think we maybe envisioned some other things, some other dominoes falling first before they made this move. Maybe we would get kicked out of the Google Play Store, because now if you look back at it, Google Play has been helping, according to the government, Google Play Store has been helping people, quote unquote, launder money for 9+ years.
Unindicted co-conspirator.
Yes, sir. So, I think we maybe expected to see something like that first. Sure. But the guys knew that this was where this led. There was no bones about it. It wasn't like they were, delusional that they were just going to be left alone forever. They understood what they were building, and they made the decision to continue building it, even knowing that they were going to lose their life for it potentially. And when I say lose their life, I'm kind of talking about the whole death athletic thing. Cody Wilson gave a really, really good speech about this I think it was still Guns and Bitcoin at that time in Austin. It was, people should look this up on YouTube. I'm pretty sure you could just type in like Cody Wilson, Death Athletic. It is outstanding. But what he talks about is
terrifying, is what it is.
It is. But
I watched that thing, and I'll put this in the show notes, and I'll share this. That little 3-minute speech was absolutely terrifying. So you sent this tweet out on that recently and had a question, right? Mm-hmm. So it's this idea about death athletic, and you talk about the honor and humility of engaging in an act that you know to be doomed, right? The honor in an act that you know to be doomed, right? Turning a desolate future into an ultimate act of defiance.
Yeah.
Right? That is hardcore. So, is this what this Bitcoin privacy fight is for? Is this the battle that must be fought? Right? Knowing what the outcome may be defeat. That's crazy talk.
It is. I do believe it is. I think that this was an inevitability. It had to happen this way. And there is, a very good chance that the guys will lose and that they will be defeated in this. Now, does that mean that the Bitcoin privacy movement is defeated? Absolutely not. That's not what that means. But it makes everyone say out loud where they stand. It makes the government say out loud, I'm telling you, you're not allowed to own your own finances, period.
Right.
So it forces them out into the light, right? And light is the best disinfectant, right? So as long as they're allowed to keep operating in the shadows and sneakily debank the people that we don't like or that say things we don't like, then they'll continue to operate that. The government operates best in the shadows. Like they know exactly how to play that game. It's only when something like this happens, when they just blatantly overstep their own guidance to arrest people for following the laws that the government themselves had put out for over a decade. It's only then that they're exposed for what they're really doing, what they really believe. And this is what turns people around to say, wait a minute, I thought that this is the country of freedom. Like this is the rugged individual country. Like we're the ones that believe that the most. All right. You should be able to strike out on your own. All right. Be your own man, quote unquote. So like you're telling me you actually actually, you can't do that. I'm not allowed to do that. So now what's happened? Now the Bitcoin privacy fight has moved on to these guys, Ashigaru, who picked up the mantle from Samourai Wallet because everything was open source, which is such a powerful tool. So they've been able to pick this up, and now they are a decentralized force. I don't know if it's one guy. I don't know if it's 10 guys. I don't know where they live. I don't know who they are. Everything they're doing is over Tor. Like, it's a much more resilient group. It's a much more resilient.
Well, they've clearly learned some lessons.
That's exactly right. So is that the Samourai Wallet being taken out is not just a defeat, because a defeat would be if we just lost everything and it was all in vain and all this was for nothing, right? Like, what did we gain here? But in reality, thousands and thousands of people have for many years been able to transact outside of government control using Samourai Wallet. Now we have a new group of people developing a new tool based completely off of Samourai Wallet, and now this new group is presumably decentralized. They're much more underground. They're much more resilient, much more able to stand up, or at least remain mostly in the shadows while they continue to develop these tools. And now people are again able to use this thing, maybe not to the level that they were before yet, but it will just take time. So we learned the lessons of the previous battles, and that's how we win, because this is a hydra. They were making the bet that they could cut the head off this one snake and that everything will die. That is the bet that they are making. They want that to happen. But as long as another head is sprung up over here and another head is sprung up over here, and people are still working and people are still involved and dedicated, it's an unwinnable fight for them, right? Because as long as we can continue to give power to individuals, we are winning. Those individuals are winning. We can lose a battle, but we continue to individually win the war. And, that to me is what I cling to, to not be so black-pilled, is because...
Diverter, I feel better already.
Things do move on. We go on, and now that doesn't mean that we forget the guys that came before us. Certainly not. Like, we need to stand for them more now than at any time. But they also understood that if they fell in this battle, they fully understood and hoped and believed that someone would pick up their sword and continue to fight. And that's exactly what's happened. And that's why they left everything as open source. They had left everything, that anyone else can build on it. And so when the government came and started seizing their stuff, it's too late. The genie is already out of the bottle. It's just a matter of, is there somebody else that's going to pick up this sword? And we've already seen that at least one other person is willing to do that. So as long as that's the case, I think we are on the side of, the winners. I think that they are the one fighting that never-ending battle. They're essentially fighting the war on drugs 2.0, right? Like, it's a never-ending battle, and the only difference is, and this is a net positive. We're giving people their freedom and their sovereignty. So as long as there's one person willing to stand up and continue that fight on, it was not all in vain.
That's really, really good to hear, and I think a lot of people are going to be happy to hear that. I wanted to ask you about the community's response to the Samourai arrests and get your take on that. When the Samourai arrests happened, did the so-called freedom money community rally behind privacy, or did most of them just walk away and focus on number go up? What's your thoughts on the community reaction?
So I think it's been, in some parts, surprising. Yeah, so initially it was a lot of kind of what I expected. I expected a lot of people to kind of duck their head down for cover.
Sure.
When you realize you're getting shot at, when maybe you thought you still had a couple more miles to get to the battlefield. And you see somebody next to you fall, and you realize, oh shit,
yeah, they just got a leg blown off.
They're shooting now. Like, holy shit.
Right. I thought the shooting was happening up over the hill, man.
No, how the hell they hit us from here? So it was initial shock for everybody, I think. Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, obviously everybody stands up and stands their ground, but I think it was just more, again, of a vindication of some of the things that we've been saying for a very long time, is that when this shit goes down, most people are going to fold. And so they folded. They did exactly what I would expect them to do. Now, there were some, however, that did stand up. Zeus, Evan Kalutis from Zeus Lightning Wallet, came out and publicly made a declaration that he's not going anywhere, that he is going to stand, and he believes he's following the law. He believes he's doing things the right way, and he's not changing anything. He withstood the initial barrage when a lot of other people folded at the first sign of trouble, and he didn't. And kind of knowing Evan a little bit, again, yet another person that far from agreeing on everything. There's been several disagreements between maybe himself or the Lightning community as a whole and the Samurai community, et cetera, et cetera. But there are certain things when it comes to red lines where we do agree. And so I believe he means what he says. But to our point, you won't know until the knock comes. And I hope it certainly doesn't. Let me be clear on that. I hope it doesn't. But,
how the industry responded, I think they were just spooked, quite honestly.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It, for the most part, had its intended effect. It had an extreme chilling effect on most people.
Yeah, and you read that indictment, talk about terrifying. I mean, the indictment is terrifying. I mean, I was shocked, right? I was like, I read this and I'm like, again, it's all abstract theory. You kind of, right? You know where this could go and very likely will go. But still, man, when you see, you go to the Samourai website, it's down. You got the FBI there. I mean, it's like, this is as real as it gets. And the heinous charges and the way that they did it, I just think it's massively criminal how they've done what they've done. I just don't understand how they get away with it. And it really is just a symptom. Again, I try to tell people this, it's not just Samurai, right?
No.
This is a very much a societal thing. Not that that's any, consolation, but who surprised you on the upside and who really disappointed you on the downside in terms of,
Well, I'll say this. It was disappointing a little bit. There were some disappointments, but as far as like larger or community wide, I think one of the biggest disappointments for me was seeing a decent amount of the Monero community, rather than take this as an opportunity to stand with a fellow privacy soldier, they took it as an opportunity to say, "I told you so." And I don't think that's the right path forward. I think Samourai Wallet had, at great risk to their own brand, had embraced Monero simply because of the fact that it was a privacy tool trying to do the same things that they were doing on Bitcoin. And they made the commitment to work on Bitcoin privacy and Bitcoin privacy only. They made the commitment that there would never be any other coin in their wallet. It was always going to be a Bitcoin only wallet, so it would always stay that way. So they decided to stand their ground and not abandon Bitcoin to the number go up crowd and go work on the next thing. They decided that it was worth fighting for. So they stayed, but they embraced Monero in the way that they were, building out a Monero swaps tool, because we understood that people were using Whirlpool, and then often they would take their toxic change from a TX0 transaction and they were swapping that into Monero and then coming back to Bitcoin. So in order to do that, they were using custodial swap services. So because of that, Samourai Wallet decided to kind of help the customers out, help the users of Samourai Wallet out. They would help build a non-custodial atomic swap tool between Monero and Bitcoin, which was a major, major milestone. That tool was built. It was ready. We're working on the final releases. So my point is, there were two ways that they could have gone, which is, see, I told you, you needed to leave that Bitcoin stuff alone, come to Monero, where, the premise is this wouldn't have happened. Or they could have said, you know what, these guys were fighting an honorable fight. They never took the route of calling, Monero people shitcoiners and dismissing them. They understood what they were trying to accomplish and felt we were on the same team. So, I would have liked to have seen a little more solidarity. But to see a decent part of the community kind of be like, I told you so, and treat it as if like they had made a mistake or they were dumb or trying to be like martyrs. These guys were not trying to be martyrs. They just understood there was a very good chance they would become martyrs, even though they don't want to. But they understood the realities of the fact that there's a very good chance they could be, and went ahead anyway.
Death athletes. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Amazing. There's nobody else.
Yeah. It's been a very lonely journey for them in a lot of aspects. kind of standing outside the norm, because Bitcoin, as its price continues to appreciate, the more and more money that comes into it, the bigger that the price gets, the more diversified the holders of the coin become, the less and less of the original ethos is going to remain. The community continues to be diluted and diluted with newcomers who, aren't seeing things the same way that we are and don't care to learn about the things that we care to learn about. The only thing that they want to make sure doesn't happen is that there's nothing that impedes the growth of their value of their asset. That's the only thing that they care about. And so there is a large swath of people that actually believe privacy is a detriment to the price of Bitcoin. This has been very clearly stated many, many times that they actually believe privacy is a detriment. So
that's crazy to me. I heard you say that. I hadn't quite heard it that directly. So you did a tweet back on December 22nd where you stated, "My heart isn't in it anymore. The days of writing guides or provoking conversation on interesting topics on here are done. Free Samurai is all that's left because they freed me." I thought that was actually heartbreaking to see that. What was that turning point?
So when I talk about my heart not being in it, I spent, as you've alluded to, many years, uncountable amount of hours that I dedicated to writing guides, to writing explanations, to trying to bring more people into the fold, because I believed that if more people understood, that they also would believe in these same things. As time goes on, that becomes a very, very weary pursuit.
Totally. I say, if you care about, digital privacy, sovereignty, you're going to age about a decade more than the other person.
Yeah, you just have the same arguments and fights and conversations just over and over and over. And I'm the type of person that I've never been one to just say things just to be saying them. Like, if I have something that I want to say, it's because I believe what I'm going to say matters, or is going to have some impact, or is different than what other people are saying. I don't want to say just the same thing that everybody else is saying. I don't want to just react to what other people are saying. I want to be the person that's saying the thing that somebody else is reacting to. So, whenever you keep getting dragged back into the same conversations over and over, and it's like, I've already said all this. And then as the years go by, some of the things that you said start happening, and you realize there's absolutely no joy in that tweet where you get to quote tweet and it's supposed to be your dunk for years later, where you're going to say, "See, I tried to tell you 3 years ago this was going to happen." You realize there is zero joy in being right about these things. It's actually heartbreaking to be right about them when you see and you're like, I was trying to tell people. And it's almost like being what I call as having the Cassandra syndrome. Cassandra was given the gift to be able to see the future and to know future events, but her curse was that nobody would ever believe her.
Okay. I forgot about that. Okay.
Yeah.
That is one hell of a curse.
Point being, it's not joyous. It's not a good feeling to be able to go back and say, "Haha, see, I was right." It's more like, man, I was right. Like, I don't want to be right about most of this stuff. So it really takes a toll on you. And then I left a career that I had spent many years building, against a lot of odds. I had built this career, and I left that and made the decision to go work for Samourai Wallet full time. Like, again, I'm just some guy, right? And so I just had this job. And so I left my job and gave up and took this risk to just go work full time for Samourai, be paid directly in Bitcoin, which was a dream, but it's very frightening to actually make that move, because you have to give up a lot of certainty for a whole lot of uncertainty. But if you believe in the thing, then that's when you have to have that conversation with yourself. Like, do I actually believe all this stuff that I've been saying all these years, or don't I?
And clearly you do. Let me ask you this. So the future of financial rebellion, after everything, the crackdowns, the arrests, the pressure, do you still believe that financial privacy can win? And if so, what does that winning look like?
Yeah, again, to me, winning means that an individual that wants to take full control of his personal finances outside of government control is able to do that. that is winning. So I don't need mass adoption. I don't need everybody to all of a sudden agree that privacy is super important. I just need there to be tools and people that are building tools that enable the anyone part of Bitcoin is for anyone that actually wants to do these things, that they have the ability to do it and the tools exist for them to be able to do it. Losing would only happen if there is a person out here that wants to take full control of their finances and they just can't. There's no escape. And so, with Samourai Wallet being gone, that's a major blow. But then we saw Ashigaru spring up, and I'm quite sure they're probably not done. That I'm sure they'll continue to build. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see another, maybe a different type of tool that would spring up. So as long as the individuals that say, yes, I want to do this, as long as there is a route for them to do it, then that to me is the form of winning. Like, I do think that there are enough individuals around that do want to do this, that it is worth working on. And then in the event that maybe it all does fall down around us and, you're able to protect yourself and your families and the people that you care about, then, that would, I guess, be some sort of like the ultimate victory. But I don't see that as being necessary. I don't see the government crumbling or capitulating completely to privacy tools as being necessary to declare a victory. I think we declare small victories every day that we allow people to do what they want to do with their own money. That is a daily small victory. So that is what winning to me looks like.
Small little acts of defiance is kind of how I think of it for me on a personal level.
Certainly.
So for those who are new, because it seems like a big war happened, right? A big battle had been fought, right? We lost a battle, not the war, but with Samourai. And, for those who are kind of just getting into this Bitcoin privacy rabbit hole and that believe in privacy and really believe in sovereignty and all of these things, how do you recommend that they get started today?
So the biggest recommendation that I think is just to find your community. That is kind of the beginning of it all, because, standing alone is not very fun. And not only that, you can accomplish some things for yourself personally, but it's much more rewarding to be able to see others also be able to accomplish the things that you're accomplishing, to maybe feel like you've contributed in some way to that. And there are so many forms of contribution. Like I've said, I don't know anything technically, and I somehow found a way to be a customer support agent because of my intimate knowledge of a product.
Oh, that was you. That was you I was talking to, man.
So I was a customer support agent, and then I was the head of QA. So I was the head of QA for Samourai Wallet, and I did that with having absolutely no real technical knowledge when I got into all this stuff of how any of this works. I was just really interested in this product because of the community that surrounded it as much as anything. Totally. The community of people is what made me feel like I could continue on and that I was being helpful. So I would say anybody that's first getting into this stuff, that community and the people that you surround yourself with is so important. And that I would also say you have to be prepared to lose a little bit. Let me put it like that, because you're not going to get all the things that you want. We should have had Bitcoin protocol level privacy improvements years and years ago. And so you have to, if you're going to get into Bitcoin privacy, you have to kind of, in my opinion, you have to go into it with the mindset that you're not going to get that. You're not going to get a protocol level privacy improvement on Bitcoin. You're not going to get confidential transactions. You're not going to get anything like that. So go into it knowing that even though you're not going to get that, there are still battles that you can win. You can still build app level privacy tools, which Samourai Wallet did very, very well for many, many years, and hopefully will continue to do once all this is over. But go into it with the understanding and the mindset that even though you might feel like you're losing some pretty big battles, that the individual wins. That's what you're looking for.
Man, yeah, we cannot lose you. We've lost, Samourai and the founders and others. You're in, man. You're in. There's no getting out for you. So last question, very, very last question. And thank you so much, Diverter. I'm so grateful for your time. But for those who are listening, what do you want them to take away from your story?
I would say, again, just I can't be any more clear on how much I truly went from having zero understanding about any of this. I had never thought about money at all. I had never really even given much thought to privacy at all, especially like digital privacy, online privacy. Like none of this stuff was even on my radar. And I went from that to being the head of a division at a company that's based, their entire existence is based around providing people with financial privacy and sovereignty within a matter of a few years, just by believing in it and continuing on step by step every day. So if you could take anything away from my story, it's like you can literally be like just some dude and have an extremely outsized impact on things that you care about just because you also care about them and you're willing to try. So I would say don't be afraid to try.
And this is what I love about the community. We'll definitely be following your work. What's the best way to follow you? Follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on there nearly as much anymore. I am still on there. I don't make quite as many comments as I used to.
You can scroll. You can doom scroll through this history.
Yeah, there's some doozies in there, but you know, I as much as I'm gone, I'm not gone, and I'm definitely not leaving the guys behind. You know, they need support right now more than ever before. So you may not see me put out a guide, but I'm definitely around if you want to hit me up, talk about anything, especially anything that you might be interested in doing to try to help the guys out and further fund their defense. I'm definitely, down to help.
Diverter, you're one of the best. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
No problem, man. Thank you for having me.
That's it, everyone. As Diverter said, don't be afraid to try. You can have an outsized impact on things that matter to you simply because you care and you're willing to try. Love that quote. Join me next time as we continue to explore the world of sovereignty and financial freedom. If you want to be a part of the conversation, hit me up on X